Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into today's episode of the Money Insights Podcast, the alternative wealth-building podcast for high-income earners. My name's Christian Allen. With me, as always, the good-looking one, Rodney the Pod Zabriskie. Rod, what is up?
Hey,
friend?
I'm doing great. Hey, I do have some news. So
is it that you're actually better looking than I suggested? That's the news.
I would not.
How many times, Rod, have you been introduced with a focus on your smashing good looks?
That may be the first time.
Okay,
so
well,
I don't want to just let it pass.
That's
notice.
One more time than I have. Okay, anyway, but that's not why we're here. Rod, tell me what news you've got, because I hear you've got some big news.
Yeah, so I think a couple of weeks ago I talked about how our son Jefferson, who is supposed to be on his way to Brazil, was having a hard time getting his visa, or at least it took a while.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to stop in Tennessee, do some missionary work there. Well, he now has his visa, and he is on his way to Brazil.
Ooh, all right. Well, congrats.
Thanks.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, he's pretty excited.
Okay, Rod, today we're going to jump into part 2 of the series that we started not long ago, right? And we're going to focus on real estate and whether real estate checks all of the boxes inside our invest with benefits philosophy. So maybe a reminder, we've got 6 core benefits that we're dealing with: leverage, velocity, cash flow, tax optimization, estate maximization, asset protection. Not necessarily in that exact order, but those are our 6 core benefits. Okay. And in part 1, we talked about how the investment optimizer as a strategy checked all those boxes. And we promised that we would circle back to talk about how some other investment opportunities or other strategies that we can use fit into that same context. Okay. So I thought the most logical one to start with was real estate, because guess what? That's where like everybody that we talk to invests.
It's true.
Almost without fail, they're real estate investors in some way, shape, or form. Now, the nice news is there's a ton of ways to do it. But we see all of those, and most people love it. So real estate's our starting point. What do you think?
I agree. I'm excited to see, but we will leave it as a question mark to begin with. Does it check all the boxes? We're going to find out.
Does it check all the? Well, that's the question. We know that the investment optimizer strategy does indeed check all the boxes. We don't know yet, and so I'm excited to figure out as we go through this. Like, I don't know the ending. No, I'm just kidding. I do know the ending, but I'm still excited for all of you to feel, see, understand the power of real estate, hopefully at a slightly higher level than you do when we started this. Okay, so that being the case, Rod, let's start with leverage. Leverage in real estate. Kick us off. How does it exist there? Why is it used in real estate, and what's the significance of it?
Yeah, leverage just feels too easy as a starting point, because when we talk about leverage in other contexts, we always rely on, for the same reasons you use leverage in real estate, we use it in these other ways, right? So, but
it's
let's
kind
talk
of
about
I was throwing you a softball, Rod, to get us going.
It was a great lob. So, and again, the reason is because people are so familiar with using leverage in real estate. At the very least, I was almost going to say almost everyone buys their home using leverage, right?
That's a good caveat. Almost. If you are a diehard follower of our man, Dave Ramsey, maybe you don't. And again, that's a maybe, because even your diehards are like, gosh, I don't know how I'm going to save like I make $100,000 and I'm somehow supposed to save like $700,000 to buy a first-time home.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Well,
so you're right.
And that's
most everybody does.
There are very few that actually make it is the problem. They actually don't end up buying a home. They just rent. Anyway, we don't need to go there. The point is,
but can I make one other point? I have to make it since we're there. You get me there. Rod, I've been thinking about this quite a bit lately, and the reason that it bothers me the most is because I just think about the last 10, 15, 20 years. And by not purchasing the home, it's not only did you miss out on living in a house for that time frame, you missed out on probably doubling, tripling, quadrupling in many cases,
Absolutely,
the value of your home and potentially creating an asset that now you don't have. Like, it could be, I would suggest to people, one of the worst financial mistakes they could make is saying, I can't purchase a home until I buy it in cash. Okay, so, but that wasn't the point of today. I just had to get it out off my chest once you brought it to the table.
Leverage, though, it just makes it amplifies all of those things. So, for example, you talk about kind of double, tripling, quadrupling. From the time we bought the home we're in now, we bought it in 2015. Within 4 or 5 years, it doubled in value. But the good news is we didn't put all that cash down on it either. So we got all the benefit of that increase on our down payment because we used leverage. So that's, again, these are just hopefully helping you get a glimpse. But I'm going to take it a step further, because when we did the virtual summit last May, we focused on using conservative leverage in order to create generational wealth. An accelerated path to generational wealth is what we called it. And in that conservative leverage, step 2, we highlighted a real estate example. And what we did is we said, okay, just to use really round numbers. So let's say someone has $100,000 that they're going to go invest in real estate. And there may be places still you could buy a property for $100,000. So
very few, maybe like in the Midwest, if you're going for like a 600 square foot, you're right. There's not very many places to buy $100,000 single property, but for example purposes,
easy number to use. Yeah. So our investor A was buying the property outright, just $100,000, no leverage used. Our investor B took $100,000, used that as a down payment, and then bought a property worth $500,000. So got a loan for the other $400,000. And what we did is we played out the first year of ownership, and we said, okay, let's just assume, we don't want to go crazy. Let's say there's 5% of cash flow coming off of it, just off of operations. Okay. And then 3% appreciation on the property.
3%?
Yep.
Ooh, crushing it.
With that, our investor A on this $100,000, so we got $5,000 of cash flow, $3,000 increase on the property. So now in 1 year, his increase went from 100,000 to 108, 8% ROI.
Not bad.
Yeah, not bad.
Not bad.
Our investor B, the 5% off the cash flow actually was 25,000, right? $500,000 property, 25,000. And the 3% appreciation was 15,000. And not only that, but because of with the cash flow, she was also paying down the debt, not a whole bunch off of the 400,000 in that first year, but $5,900 paid down on it. So by the end of the first year, she turned her 100,000 into 145,902. So it's the difference.
Wait, Rod. We're not finished with that. I feel like you need to play this out to be more fair. Okay. She did have a debt that needed to be paid.
She did.
Did you incorporate that debt?
Yes, because she paid her on the 500,000. Her cash flow was a lot bigger, five times bigger than what his was, and so she was able to. The majority of that went to pay on the debt.
Okay, so I guess I'm confused. So her money then couldn't have gone from 100,000 to 148 because she had to pay off a certain amount of that. That 48,000 went to pay her debt. So that would mean, okay, here's the thing, Rod. This is still going to be super impressive. Like, there's a big difference, but I want to be fair, because if there's people listening to this and they're like screaming into the microphone, well, they probably don't have microphones, right?
Into the speaker.
They're screaming into their speaker. They're like, Rod, people have to pay on that debt. So once you pay on the debt, let's make an assumption there.
Okay, well,
we assume we would have to take off of that to account for because again, she's got to be paying on the loan.
Okay, that's great. So let's do that. Let's say that of the 25,000, 20 of it was going to pay on the debt. Okay.
Okay, you went higher than I thought. I like it.
I mean, we're just gonna give all the naysayers
we're going
what they
super
want.
Conservative.
Yep. So we're gonna say off of her net cash flow was 5,000, so she matched his, right?
Okay.
We'll just say that.
Yeah.
So net cash flow 5,000, the appreciation 15,000. She gets all of that, right? She doesn't have to share that with the bank. That's the beauty of leverage.
Every bit of it.
Yep.
Rod.
And
by the way, 3% over the last 15 years has been like, have we had a year in the last 15 years that was 3%?
Maybe last year.
Okay. Aside from last year, I guess I was talking about prior to the most.
But you're right. In
slowdown.
a lot of years, it's been 10, 15, 20% or more. Right?
Yeah.
Like I said, mine doubled in 4 or 5 years. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So, so if you take that then and you say, and then also again, of the money that she was paying towards the loan, she had a principal reduction of 5,900. So with the adjustment in numbers, is now basically 125.
Okay. So now you're comparing 125 to 108.
Correct.
Which, by the way, as far as I can see, that is 3 times higher. Yeah. 3 times higher than the 108. 8 times 3 is 24. So 3 and some change. Okay. That's crazy though. I think I like the example because it illustrates that you don't even have to get a good return in order to get value from the amplification that leverage creates inside of an investment. And I say this all the time. I believe it. There is no more powerful wealth building principle that exists than leverage. It's just number one. It does things that no other concept can do. That's my take.
Yeah. And this is true regardless of how you invest in real estate. Or you talked about there are a ton of different ways to do that. And whether you are flipping properties, most likely you're using leverage. Whether you're a buy and hold, most likely you're using leverage. We would encourage you to use leverage, right? Conservatively, be smart, do the numbers, make sure you understand how it's impacting things, but using leverage. And even when you invest in a syndication, using leverage. Now, again, we understand people's experience and whatnot with leverage. Pick the right operators, all that kind of thing still holds true. But the point is that the leverage allows you to do things with your investing that you cannot do without it.
Okay. I think that's well said. I think we have adequately covered leverage. There's probably no other asset class that better embodies how to use leverage outside of real estate. Okay. Next, Rod, we have velocity of money in real estate. Quick reminder, not a long one, quick reminder of velocity, what it is, and how does real estate utilize the concept of velocity?
Yeah, velocity is the concept of getting your original money back. So in this earlier example, they put the 100,000 in. How quickly do they get that 100,000 back so they can go out and put that somewhere else, invest elsewhere? It's going to take a lot longer for person A than it was for person B because of leverage. So leverage is a huge piece in this concept of velocity for a lot of reasons. The reason I just mentioned is one of them, higher return. But like you pointed out a couple of weeks ago, the higher return exists anyway, right? That doesn't necessarily, it does necessarily speed up leverage or the velocity just because you're getting a higher return, right? But if you can take that money and go invest in something else that gets you the same return, then you're just getting the same return in other places. But here's where the leverage does speed up the velocity. And that is, for example, like on a refi, right? So she puts the original 100,000 in as the value of the property appreciates because maybe she does some improvements on the property and or just appreciation in general in the market. She gets to a place, let's say it's 3 or 4 years later, where she is refining the property, getting her original 100,000 back and using that to go out and invest elsewhere. So, whereas investor A, number one, didn't use leverage to begin with and is not going out and doing it later, right? The refi is not a thing if you don't have the leverage to begin with. So, again, it's I know I keep going back to step 1 and we're in step 2 on the velocity, but my point
talk
is
about velocity, Rod.
it speeds it up. It speeds it up
Okay.
in real estate because of what we're doing on the leverage.
I want to clarify something here because I think this is important. Are you suggesting, Rod? And I would suggest that this is the ideal, but I want to make sure I'm really clear that I'm not putting words in your mouth. So what I would suggest is the ideal situation is that I invest my 100,000. We're just using our same numbers. Invest that 100,000. I get that money back, but I still have the same $100,000 stake in the original investment.
Yes.
And I think this is super critical. It's not just about getting my money back, because then if I just go do it again, and I'm just getting a return, I haven't really created the amplification that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The key here is to get my money back as quickly as I can by producing a return that gives me my money back. And oftentimes that could be in the form of refi, right? We allow some appreciation to happen for a couple of years, and then we refi it and we get our money back out, but we still own a stake in that investment. Now that's when it becomes really powerful, because then you're now creating multiple assets that are doing the same thing. And even if you don't have a huge amount of extra money to put into deals all the time every year, most of the people we talk to do, but let's just say you don't, that's still a model that you can run with, right? You can say, okay, I'm going to put this here. Maybe it takes me 5 years to get it back, but now I've got a stake of, I've got an income source coming from that investment, and I've now taken that money and I've done it again. And even if that's the only thing that you do, you would dramatically accelerate the time frame it takes to get to your kind of financial freedom, right? It might be the difference between going from age 65 to age 50 or 55, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you are one of those people that can continue to pump more money into the system, then it just really blows up.
Yep, absolutely. Snowball effect for sure.
Okay, leverage in real estate, velocity in real estate. Those are things we talk about all the time, Rod. We also talk about cash flow. Hit on this one for us. It's kind of obvious, but just hit on it.
Yeah, cash flow. So just going back to the whole idea of replacing your active working income with passive cash flow. And real estate is an amazing vehicle to be able to do that. And again, in regardless of how you invest in it, if you're buying your own properties, it's buy and hold, you're creating cash flow that's coming back to you. That's a source of income for you. And then you go and invest in a syndication, or you go whatever, there are a lot of different ways that you can invest to create that cash flow. But the point is, as you're doing that, as that snowball that you talked about a minute ago is building, and you now have multiple streams of income coming off of that, that all of a sudden gets you to a place where you can replace your active working income and you hit that financial freedom.
Rod, what's a cash on cash return? I got to make sure that people know what is a cash on cash return.
Well, cash on cash is referencing the flow back. So it's different than, so we often talk about IRR, meaning the return that you're getting, but measured in time. Because if I say I'm getting my cash on cash return is whatever, 100%, or you talk about these 1.7 multiples or things like that. And I can do that in 2 years or 3 years. That's an amazing IRR. But if it takes me 10 years to do that, maybe not such a great IRR, right? When measured with time. So cash on cash is great. You look at it, understand it, and measure it. It matters.
With context.
Yes.
With context. You just have to add the element of time for sure. For sure. Okay. So anything else you want to hit on as it relates to cash flow? Obviously, cash flow is the money that comes off of our properties, right? And real estate is, again, kind of the prime example of an investment vehicle that can produce consistent, regular cash flows. Of course, the key is to turn those cash flows into net income by doing the right things. And we'll get into that right now.
Yeah. And I hit on a little bit with the having multiple streams. It kind of works out that way just because that snowball effect, but you want it to work out that way as well, because there are times where you're your property is vacant, or you needing to do an upgrade, or you have extra expenses you weren't expecting, or things like that. So if you're always relying on a single property for that, in most cases you might be great and have that cash flow, but you don't want to be relying on a single. For the same reason we talk about diversification in other ways, having multiple streams
security, consistency, those are
Yep.
important, especially when you're talking about money, and the way that you spend. And of course, the obvious thing is you've got to have cash on hand when you're dealing with real estate or any other investment. It's important to keep cash. Okay, Rod, the next three that we're going to hit on are maybe a little bit less obvious than our first three, right? Because everybody thinks about leverage, velocity, and cash flow as like those core benefits of real estate investing. Not everybody. And actually, I was watching a video today, Rod, and they were talking about not stocks, sorry. They were talking about index mutual funds as index funds as the way to invest. Like, you don't need to do other than just index funds is the way to go. And the first reason that they suggested that it was one of the best places or the best place was because of tax benefits. And I almost fell over in my chair because I was thinking, I swear, Rod, I'm about to talk about tax optimization in real estate, and it is 10 times more powerful and impactful than what I can get in the index fund space. Now, I'm not saying there's no benefits by being in mutual funds, right? I go put my money there, and as long as I hold it for long enough, I can have it be a long-term capital gain instead of a short-term or ordinary income. But that's it. Like, that's basically the extent of my tax benefits, right?
Yeah.
Rod, I would love for you to talk about some of the primary benefits that exist in real estate, because again, they're just so much more impactful than what we can get by throwing money into index funds. Again, not that there's never a place for using index funds. I just wouldn't make that my go-to for tax benefits. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Well, let's start with the direct comparison. And so I'll turn the question back to you. When you invest in real estate, would you say you're most often facing short-term capital gains or long-term capital gains?
Long-term capital gains, because of course it's not super liquid anyway. So it would be hard. I mean, if I'm doing a flip, I might be able to do it quicker, but most often you're looking for long-term capital gains.
Yeah. And the point there is that the treatment on what you talked about with stocks or mutual funds is the same here. In other words, if you have that appreciation on the property that we talked about earlier, you don't get taxed on that as the property grows. That all gets pushed down to
it's
later on.
That one is silly because you're right. There's like from a comparison standpoint, that's just like the nature of any investment, right? Like you can invest in, most investments can give you at least that pushback for the time that you're invested in it.
Yep.
Not all. If you're invested in a CD, you'll get a 1099, but most places, that's the way it goes.
Yeah. And then secondly, in this comparison, do index funds give you the opportunity to have depreciation?
Rod, people don't even know what depreciation is. So depreciation didn't even come up in that conversation. So
it doesn't.
I was excited to hear about the tax benefits, but it was exclusively that you could make it a long-term capital gain instead of ordinary income. So your comparison point is pretty easy. You're again, I'm throwing softballs to you.
Yeah. So let's talk about depreciation real quick, because when you have a hard asset, and it's true in real estate, but it's also true with, a vehicle or machinery in your business or whatever, right? Anytime you have those kinds of hard assets that have a time frame, a life cycle built into it, then you get to count that against your income, right? It's a tax deductible expense against your income. And with real estate, that happens anyway, right? And then secondly, the law that passed a few years ago created what they called bonus depreciation, so that you can accelerate that, front end load it in the first year. And initially it was better than it is now, right? For this year, for 2023, we're at 80% bonus depreciation. In 2024, it'll move to 60%. But the point is number one, you have depreciation. Secondly, we can accelerate that, have more in the first year. And then the next piece is that, okay, great. So we wrote all that off, but if then we still sell the property, now we have just a larger capital gain as a result. Unless you do a 1031 exchange.
Oh man. Well, why don't you just do the equivalent in a mutual fund? Can't you just do a 1031 exchange there?
Ooh, I don't think that tax code has been written yet, so we don't have a.
Well, we'll keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll happen.
Good call.
But yeah, that's exactly it, right? There are very few assets where you can sell the asset, move to a new one, but you don't have a tax consequence for doing that. Well, real estate happens to be one of those. So they
also have that kind of niche deferred sales trust, which has a similar kind of benefit to what you can get from a 1031. Yeah. You know, so depending on situation, but the point, like largely that you're making is that, okay, we talked about long-term capital gains in my index funds, but that's like it. Mm-hmm. And what we've talked about in a real estate investment is 3 or 4 ways. And we didn't even mention, you know, cost segregation analysis, which is another way that can create an additional tax benefit. So like there's just a bunch of ways to create that, which of course, if you understand how returns work, by reducing taxes, we are quite literally increasing the return.
Yeah. And then there's like the clincher, because you could say, oh, but Rod, if I'm getting the depreciation and then doing a 1031 exchange, I'm still just pushing that tax further down the road, but eventually it's going to have to be paid. Unless you die while you're owning the property, because when you pass away and you own a piece of property, that property gets what they call a step up in basis. So in other words, let's take the original 100,000 that was invested in our earlier example, and 50 years later, you've grown that snowball, and now but you did all the 1031 exchanges and the depreciation, and you kept pushing that tax bird, you know, down the line. Now it's worth whatever, $25 million. And theoretically, that's, you know, almost 24.9 million of gain that you've carried over this 50-year time frame. But then because you get that step up in basis, and all that means is that instead of having your cost basis at the 100,000 that you originally paid, it immediately and magically jumps up to whatever the current value is at the time you died. So if the next day your heirs sold the property, the basis on that is 25 million. In other words, they're not going to pay all of those capital gain taxes on it.
Hey Rod, what if I poke a hole in your analysis here? I've got one for you. Okay. Let's see if you can rebut me. And by the way, I already know the rebuttal, so I think you can. But here's the question, Rod. What if I want to get to that money while I'm alive? Like, that's great that I can pass, like once I pass it on, I get a step up in basis, but like, you know, I know I'm 1031 exchanging and stuff, but like I need to use some of this dang money, and I don't want to get crushed from a tax standpoint when I do it. What the heck?
Yeah. So the beauty is that you're getting all of that cash flow as you're doing this. You're using the leverage for the refis and other things like that as you go. So there are a lot of opportunities to get that value back out of the property while you go.
Well, that's the key. Okay. So that's the key. You can just get it back out of the property, and you do it via loan, right? So while I'm living, this is just like life insurance, by the way. We talked about this exact same principle. While I'm alive, I borrow the money. I borrow the money against my real estate. I borrow the money against my life insurance. By doing that, I never have to pay any income taxes. So it's really simple to use an asset, one that has significant equity. And it's just as simple as using it as from a loan basis rather than trying to sell it as an example. Yep. So, okay, cool. Rod, that's number 4, tax optimization. Less people think about real estate tax optimization, although I think that the alternative voices, the alternative investment voices are growing. There's
absolutely,
and maybe it's just because we are in this space, it feels that way, but I do think that there's some traction. Real estate has incredible tax benefits. Okay, segment, Rod, number 5, asset protection through real estate, what's the connection between the two, if there is any?
Yeah, maybe first we define asset protection. This is basically you've built all this wealth, right? We talked about all this snowball and all these things, but you want to make sure that you are protecting that so that you're not subject to frivolous lawsuits and other problems coming up that can take those assets away from you. And real estate is it kind of teeters on the fence because you have to do the right things to make it work, right? So somebody could be more vulnerable by the fact that they own real estate and they had like a slip and fall or something on their property. Someone is now suing them because they owned the real estate. But now the other side of the fence is if you do all the things correctly when you're setting it up, in other words, the way you own it matters. So you set it up inside of an LLC. And what that does is it isolates that property so it's by itself. So in other words, they have the slip and fall, you're getting sued, but they can't get to any assets that are outside of that LLC. So all of the other real estate you own are in separate LLCs. Your personal property they can't get to because it's isolated there. So the point with asset protection is that you have you're building a shield, so to speak, around each of the individual real estate properties that you own so that the maximum vulnerability that you have is what's inside of there. But then in addition to that,
there's more
because you have insurance, right? You're going to have insurance on that property anyway. The liability insurance would cover that slip and fall up to a maximum. So again, we also recommend having umbrella coverage above that to make up the difference if ever you hit your maximums on your insurance. So there are multiple facets to it, but they're really easily built around real estate. The laws, kind of the legal side of it, makes it really easy to do the things that we're talking about with real estate.
If you think about real estate as an investment strategy, right? And it encompasses a few things, right? So for example, real estate in and of itself doesn't have leverage built into it.
Yeah.
Right. I have to use that in, like, it's a strategy to borrow banks' money or other people's money to create that additional amplification.
Yeah.
Similarly, when you think about how asset protection works, it's just the same. It's real estate in conjunction with some very simple but appropriate asset protection planning. Again, like you're saying, making sure you're owning them in the right type of entities. Doing that alone will keep you completely protected from those outside issues. And then, like you said, you can carry that additional layer of protection by having insurance. So there's really no reason why real estate investing as a strategy shouldn't be bulletproof when it comes to asset protection.
Absolutely. Well said.
Rod, let's get into estate maximization. How does real estate impact estate maximization? And you did give us a little bit of a teaser, maybe not even a teaser. Maybe you gave us a giveaway, but that's okay. Let's hear it. I want to make sure that it wasn't subtle. Everyone's got to pick up on it.
Yep. So, and the biggest thing is it's that step up in basis that I talked about. And this, so Christian, a minute ago, you talked about how with leverage, with asset protection, real estate doesn't automatically have those things. We do the things that need to happen to bring that to the table.
Yeah.
On this estate maximization, it just happens with real estate. The law says when you die, you get a step up in basis, and that just happens. You don't have to do anything special.
It's incredibly powerful. I'll give an example. So maybe I gave this example before, but my grandpa passed. He was 96 years old. He lived an incredible life. He just passed about a year ago. Not even that, 6-8 months ago. And he owned a bunch of fourplexes in down there by Brigham Young University, right? So it was like, it's a bumping area. I think there was like 9 of them, but he purchased them for next to nothing, and he was considering selling them. And anyway, and I was over here silently like rooting for him not to sell. And it wasn't that he needed that. He didn't need the income or the money. He was totally well off. That wasn't the issue. I think he was just maybe tired of having that extra thing on the side to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But can I just tell you the difference between the amount of money that my grandpa passed on by not selling his real estate prior to his passing is probably, 30% of that value.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're probably talking, I don't know, maybe $8-9 million. So like the difference was $2 or $3 million. Like that's insane. Right. So just by owning that asset, owning the real estate asset until I die. And again, the only reason that someone would sell it in that situation is if they needed the money. But guess what? If you have the equity, you can still pull out the money and not pay the taxes. So while I realize that there's some caveats, I can't get 100% of my equity out, but I can't get 100% of my money out because so much of it's going to taxes anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love real estate as a estate planning tool. Aside from life insurance, I think it's as powerful as any asset that we can pass on from one generation to the next.
Agreed.
Okay, Rod, let's recap this thing. So we've talked about how real estate fits into it. The question I think that we're trying to answer is, does it check all the boxes? Do you think we adequately proved out that theory that it does?
I think we did. Although I'm realizing on the tax optimization point, I realized we left out a huge gaping part of that.
Okay, what is it?
And that is, so we focused really on depreciation, just like almost 100%, and then 1031s and all that kind of stuff. But when we buy real estate,
that was your fault, Rod. I was just listening.
It was there, and I didn't grasp it when we were there. But it's a business, so you have expenses. You have a lot of tax deductions that you can get because you own real estate that you wouldn't have in other places. So again,
yes, you suddenly purchased a business.
Yep.
And there's just so many things you can do to get tax deductions on your business, right? Like while still creating the benefits. So if I'm going to spend money to find my real estate, to like in the effort of the overall investment strategy, right? Investing in real estate as a strategy, it's usually going to cost time, money, energy, all those things. And it's nice to know I can bring money back out, and I might as well use those things for my expenses. And of course, when I do that, I still have increased my income. I've just not increased my taxable income.
Yep.
Good point, Rod. Good point. Okay. I'm glad that you caught that one. I would have listened back to this and started yelling at my phone, like, Rod. I'm just kidding.
Say it.
Okay, this has been fun. Quick overview of what we hit on. We talked about how real estate checks all 6 boxes: leverage, velocity, cash flow, tax optimization, asset protection, estate maximization. It checks all of them, Rod. I'm giving it the passing grade. In fact, I'm giving it a big fat A+. So my final thoughts, and maybe I should ask you, Rod, do you have any final thoughts before I close this up?
Just because we're coming up on Christmas, I feel like I need to take advantage of this opportunity with the A+. It's going to be A+++++. Just a reference to the Christmas Story.
Yeah.
His little fantasy about his grade. Yeah.
Hopefully you're old enough to have seen the Christmas Story like Rod is. I'm just kidding. Okay. Final thoughts here, Rod. If you're going to invest in real estate, make sure you invest with benefits, and real estate is an incredibly powerful way to do that. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights Podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights Podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth-building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.